driver of climate change is greenhouse gas emissions. When things go to landfills, particularly food, as they break down and decompose, all they do is produce greenhouse gases, specifically methane.
The food waste program is highly beneficial to the university because landfill is where stuff goes and sits forever.
Food waste is something that can be turned into compost and then can be used in soil and in gardens and things like that.
The reuse program is run through University Dining Services so that to-go containers are no longer disposable, they're reusable.
Pretty much anything and everything can be linked back to sustainability in some way, shape, or form, and I think that that's something that everyone should try and prioritize.